Do you have somewhere in your life where you experience a love that connects and transforms? Somewhere you return to where you know that you are deeply loved, and you love who you are, and you love others? A place or a group of people in which you feel part of something larger and longer lasting than your one life? I have a couple of these places in my life. One of them that is very present to me right now, and I'll explain why that is in a little bit, is my family's home, which we call Highfield. No big surprise, it's situated on a high field in a small town in northwest Connecticut. The home was built in the late 1700s and has been in my family for over 100 years. Purchased by my great-grandfather and passed down the generations. It has been an important family gathering place filled with strong traditions and lots of love. It's a place that has hosted many weddings, including my own. It's a place where children have been introduced to their larger family and grown into themselves. It's where, through caring for my younger cousins, I picked up some of the nurturing abilities I live every day now as a mother. It's also seen, of course, family disagreements, difficult conversations about my grandmother's health and care, and it's seen death. Yet through the many changes of our world and our family over the decades, it has remained in so many ways the same. When my cousins and I reached our teenage and young adult years, we began gathering there on our own for what we called the party of our generation. A quite ironic name, considering that we carried on the same activities that our parents' generation had engaged in which they introduced to us as children. We caught crayfish, as we call them up north, in the Chippewa River. We explored old dusty cars and boats in the barn and drawers and trunks full of old family photos and letters. We took walks down East Street and visited the horse farm there. We visited the little bookstore and the depot. We cooked together and enjoyed the cool summer nights on the patio. We lounged around on the old, not so comfy furniture, which has held generations of our family. And we ate lunch at Clamps, a burger stand whose business card says, "No sign, no address, no phone, just good food." The only sign they do have is about the size of a license plate, and it reads Clamps, established 1939. It's next to a bulletin board of old photos, including one of my father and his sisters eating there more than 50 years ago. Last week, my father and his sisters gathered at Highfield to take inventory of the centuries of accumulated contents and to make a final decision about the sale of the house. It'll go on the market sometime in 2020. Now, having to say goodbye to this house, Highfield, feels like losing part of my roots, disconnecting from a place that has shaped who I am in many ways. We knew when my grandmother died right before Christmas 2017 that this was coming sometime soon. But the question I'm asking myself, and I know that some of my family members are as well, is how will I stay connected to family and to the tradition that is so rooted in this place if we don't have this house in which to gather? Now, part of my family gathered a few weeks ago in Oregon, the other side of the country, where my brother and his wife and son now live. I ran out of vacation reading, so I picked up a novel at the local used bookstore to last me the rest of the trip. Little did I know how relevant this book would be. The Turner House by Angela Flournoy is the story of an African-American family and their family home on Yarrow Street on the east side of Detroit. All 13 Turner children were raised there. Now their father is dead and their mother is nearing the end of her life. The children, scattered geographically and living their lives, are arguing about what to do with the house. And of course, everyone has an opinion. It's a home filled with memories, as well as some ghosts that have haunted Cha-Cha, the eldest, into adulthood. Flournoy writes, "The house on Yarrow Street was their sedentary mascot, its crumbling facade, the Turner coat of arms. The book was inspired by the author's grandparents' home in Detroit, and I can feel the personal struggle in what she writes. The attachment to this place, alongside the recognition that it's a facade or mascot for something really much deeper and more meaningful. It's the tradition that has grown within the house's walls, its heart and soul that really matter. When I think about the heart and soul of Highfield, what defines the experience for me is not necessarily the things that we do over and over, generation after generation, but the values these activities reflect. These include things like spending technology-free time with family, enjoying nature, appreciating art and history and old things, giving children the freedom to play and explore, connecting the past and present, and celebrating love. The love that lives at this family home has connected and transformed my family in ways that will last far beyond the sale of the house. None of this is dependent on the crumbling 1700s structure itself. Just as my family has spread out geographically from the Northeast to Texas and Oregon and elsewhere, our larger culture has become more diasporic. It's easy to feel unmoored or disconnected when we move around and live far from extended family or those familiar places that connect us to ourselves. This is what Ari Goldman, the author of the reading I shared earlier, experienced as he moved not too far, but beyond walking distance from a synagogue, and as his journalism career took off. He found himself drifting away from the tradition and the rituals that embodied this tradition. But then he felt himself pulled back by a deep desire to remain connected to his roots and to sustain these roots in whatever way he could, even if it meant a solitary Sabbath meal at a Bridgehampton restaurant. I craved the Sabbath, he said. I needed it to wrap around me like the woolen prayer shawl that I had left back home. He recommitted to celebrating the Sabbath not just because he's supposed to in his tradition or because it's what he's always done. He did it because it helps him to be himself. He recognized that thread that William Stafford writes about in his poem and restored his hold on that thread, which gives him meaning and purpose throughout the many changes of life. This church is a place you can return to. A place where you can be yourself, a place where you belong. But the church is not defined by its forms and structures, but by the connection and the transforming experience of love that this gathering place makes possible. I hear this from many of you when life or illness keeps you away from church for a time. When you finally return, it feels like a homecoming. Equilibrium is restored and all is well. This feeling that we experience here is the heart and soul of First Church. It has remained through time and many changes. It's a spiritual feeling of being rooted or at home, as well as a feeling of being connected to the larger web of life and to past, present, and future. This is a church that has been transforming people within and beyond its walls through the power of love since 1899. This heart and soul is sustained not by the physical gathering space, because that has changed over our history and continues to change. It's sustained by the stories that we tell over and over again, and that we live out ever anew. These stories connect us to our roots and remind us that we're part of something larger and longer lasting than our one life. First Unitarian Church of Dallas began as a haven of hope for those, as they said, at sea without a chart or compass for their religious and spiritual lives. It was a place where people who felt disconnected from dogma could find direction and establish roots. So they built a church community. Our church's charter said that we exist to proclaim the glories and the grandeur of our religion of love. They knew that they had something important to offer, just as we do today. So they put love at the center as their doctrine, a love that allowed them and us to live authentically, to embrace the fullness of ourselves and others, and to bridge differences to transform the world. This is what we've been about all along and why we gather as a church today still. This is our thread and the tradition that we, you and I, carry on. It takes different forms in different times and generations, but the core remains the same. We are a church of transformative love. I know that many of you have found love in these pews, sometimes romantic love, the love of a community that holds you in times of sorrow and celebration, the love of a God of many names, and the love of acceptance that gives you the courage to live with spiritual authenticity. A story of transformative healing love that I return to again and again is that of a Unitarian Universalist minister named Gail Geisenhainer and the experience that she had in her first Unitarian Universalist church. It's Gail's story, but it's also a story shared by so many who find themselves in Unitarian Universalist churches, both those like me who were raised here and those who found their way here at some point in adulthood. Gail was 38 years old, living in Maine, working as a snowplow driver, and rejected her friends' invitations to his church over and over again because she was convinced that no church would welcome queer people like her. So when she did go, she dressed very intentionally. As she wrote, "I spiked my short hair straight up into the air. I dug out my heaviest, oldest work boots, the one with the chainsaw cut that exposed the steel toe. I got my torn blue jeans and my leather jacket. There would not be a shred of ambiguity this Sunday morning. They would embrace me in my full Amazon glory, or they could fry ice. I carefully arranged my outfit so it would highlight the rock-hard chip I carried on my shoulder. I bundled up every shred of pain and hurt and betrayal I had harbored from every other religious experience in my life, and I lumbered into that tiny meeting house on the coast of Maine." She expected fear, but no one flinched. She expected rejection, but they said, "Stay for coffee, dear." She's described how the church loved up the scattered parts of her and guided her from shattered to whole, from outcast to beloved among many. She and the congregation helped each other to grow and transform. She helped lead them through the Welcoming Congregation program, which is designed to help congregations live their values around LGBTQ inclusion. Now, this wasn't without its bumps. It was the mid-1980s in the thick of the AIDS crisis, when one member shared in worship her disgust at LGBTQ people. The congregation gently called this member back into covenant, not condoning her dehumanizing words, but also not dehumanizing her in the process. At the same time, the congregation transformed Gail. They helped her bring together all of who she was rather than forcing her to leave parts of herself at the door. She found a community of tradition in which she felt loved, and that love softened her facade. What they did for Gail was the best of Unitarian Universalism in action. And eventually she became a Unitarian Universalist minister, helping to create this experience for the people in her congregations. If we are to live the heart and soul tradition of Unitarian Universalism and of this church, we must help create that feeling of love and spiritual rootedness for others. The Catholic nun, Joan Chittister, whom we've referred to throughout the summer and whose recent book inspired our exploration of spiritual authenticity this summer, writes, "We don't go to groups to lose ourselves. We go to groups in order to become our best selves, while we enable everybody else to become their best selves too." Being rooted in the loving community of this church, in a tradition that says you are worthy of love no matter what, frees us to live more authentically. The thread that runs throughout serves as our chart and compass and keeps us connected to our values and our purpose as we change and grow. As family gathers and disperses, homes are created and given up, facades are built and crumble, people come and go. I know that I will always have my family and I will always have Unitarian Universalism. Neither of these communities are perfect in any way. but they are communities in which I am deeply rooted, to which I return again and again, to find myself and to know that I am loved. And you too have this here, and I hope elsewhere as well. So let us continue to tell the stories of the glories and the grandeur of our religion of love, and to be a community that makes this love real for us and for all people. May it be so. Amen.